Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Reckless Paradise podcast. I am your host, Dystro, and tonight is the final episode of October. Happy Halloween, everyone. Hopefully, you guys had a good time going trick or treating or whatever. Go trunk or treating if you are within like some areas and all that stuff. But tonight's episode is another serial killers episode. If I could speak today. So we've been doing this since the incarnation of Reckless Paradise podcast in 2022, and we've done this two times before. If you guys have not seen those episodes, I highly recommend you go watch and listen to them because we've had our good friend and good buddy Corey come on, the two times that we've done it, and we've had a good time doing it. And since Marissa's not here, she's doing some stuff behind the scenes and all that stuff, taking care of her mental health and all that stuff. Wish her well wishes. I had to pick up the mantle, and this is another serial killers episode, but I'm not gonna do very well known ones like we did Ted Bundy, we did Jeffrey Dahmer, we did the Zodiac killer, we done some of the most kind of well known ones, I guess, in the time frame that we've done it. This one's kind of very not well known. If you've probably heard of it before, this serial killer is based in the Whitechapel district of London, England, in 1888. And yes, it's like very very old school. I'm talking about Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper is like one of those killers that is not very well known in some circles, but it has to be brought up at some point because I think maybe some of the killers that we had back then kind of based their ideology and their mannerisms, I should say that loosely, on Jack the Ripper. Like, saying, like, preying on women and children and all that stuff. Maybe sometimes on men. You just never know nowadays. But, yeah. So, tonight's episode of Serial Killers is on Jack the Ripper. And this is going to be a very Halloween mainstay from now on. Cause, it's the spookiest night of the year, it's like, lots of frights and all that stuff. So kind of strap yourselves in, listen to what I have to say about Jack the Ripper, and let's get right on into it. So, like I said, this is Jack the Ripper. They were unidentified serial killer, active in around the impoverished Whitechapel district of London, England in 1888. In both criminal case files and the contemporaneous journalistic accounts, the killer was also called the Whitechapel Murderer in Leather Apron. Now, they're born. This is unknown. Some of this stuff is unknown, like the born, like when they were born, and the motive. But the motive is probably sexual sadism and or rage. But the victims is also unknown. There's five I'm sorry, canonical. Sorry, if I can speak today. The date of these murders is like from 1888 to 1891, so a 3 year span. Let's just say that. So, some of these attacks ascribed to Jack the Ripper typically involved women working as prostitutes who lived and worked in the slums of the East End of London. Their throats were cut prior to abdominal mutilations. The removal of internal organs from at least three of the victims led to speculation that their killer had some anatomical or surgical knowledge. Rumors that the murderers were connected intensified in September and October of 1888, and numerous letters were received by media outlets in Scotland Yard from individuals perpetrating to be the murderer. So this is kind of like one of those situations where it's like people were kind of like not giving fake news, but it was kind of fake news to the police and be like, oh yeah, I'm the killer. Oh, I'm the killer. I'm the killer. And none of that was to be true, but it was like they were synonymous with like keeping their identity a secret sort of thing. If you think about it in movie lore, this is one of those uh I'm trying to think. The like one that kind of comes close to that is it was like Arkham by Gaslight or something, and it was like Commissioner Gordon was the Jack the Ripper person and all that stuff. Also spoilers, sorry. Um, but it was like one of those things. It's kind of what it feels like to me. It's like very detective mystery sort of thing. Which, like, some of these serial killers, it's like, it's led up to interpretation. Like, like with some of the things that they did in the past and all that stuff, it's like maybe some of the, current day, murders or whatever, like they kind of like had to get a motive or they had to get some inspiration from some of these people. Like, like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer, like they kind of, I felt like to me they kind of knew each other, sort of thing, in passing maybe. But it was like one of those things, like, okay, like, well, I'm gonna study your work and you study my work. It's like kind of like cheating off a test. Um, so the name Jack the Ripper originated in the Dear Boss letter written by an individual claiming to be the murderer, which was disseminated in the press. The letter is widely believed to be or to have been a hoax and may have been written by journalists to heighten interest in the story and increase their newspaper circulation. Another letter, the From Hell letter, if I can speak today, was received by George Lisk of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee and came with half of a preserved human kidney, purportedly taken from one of the victims. The public came increasingly to believe in the existence of a single serial killer known as Jack the Ripper, mainly because both of the extraordinary brutal nature of the murders and the media coverage of the crimes. So this is kind of like nowadays sort of thing. It's like, when, like, going back to Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer, like they were super huge in the news, but it's like, a lot of people love them, like, especially women, like, they love Ted Bundy, even though even though he murdered them, they loved him. And plus, like, he was handsome and good looking and all that stuff, but they don't know how or what to describe Jack the Ripper. I'm guessing. Um, but it's like one of those things where it's led up to interpretation, like I said. Um, but it's like one of those like rare cases of like we don't know who or what they look like, and it's like like when they. I don't know if they had sketches back then or anything. I'm presumably saying they did, but I do not know if they had that technology back then like we do now. The extensive the extensive newspaper coverage bestowed widespread and enduring international notoriety on the Ripper, and the legend solidified. Police investigation into the series of 11 brutal murders committed in Whitechapel and Spitalfields between 1888 and 1891 was unable to connect all of the killings conclusively to the murders of 1888. Five victims, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Indells, and Mary Jane Kelly, are known as the Canonical Five, and their murders between August 31st and November 9th in 1888 are often considered to be the most likely to be linked. Their murders were never solved, and the legends surrounding these crimes became a combination of historical research, folklore, and pseudo-history, capturing public imagination to the present day. Which it's kind of true nowadays. With some of these, like, murders, like when we were talking about, I think last year I was talking about the Night Prowler killer. It's like he listened to Night Prowler by AC/DC and he would just go and murder people, like, just for fucking fun. No rhyme or reason or anything. It was just he just listened to Night Prowler and he just went and did it and just went back to bed the next day and just woke up like nothing happened. Um, it's like one of those cases where it's like I'm thinking, like, if people watched something or they saw something, it's like, okay, like, well, if they can get away with it, I can too, and it's not really gonna work like that. Because the justice system is like they're really holding down on like stuff like this, and it makes me as not as a journalist, but as like a podcaster, I should say in that stride. Like talking about this stuff, it kind of like opens doors to like more information and all that stuff, which I want to like learn more about some of these people. And it's like like go into their mental psyche, like what happened to them as a kid, what led to this breaking point, and then how they had passed on and like their legend and their folklore and pseudo history, like it said, capturing the imagination of the present day audience and all that stuff. So, with also that being said, let's go into like a little bit of the background here. So, in the mid 19th century, England experienced an influx of Irish immigrants who swelled the populations of the major cities, including the East End of London. From 1882, Jewish refugees fleeing the pogroms of the Russian Empire and the other areas of Eastern Europe immigrated into the same area. The parish of Whitechapel in the East End became increasingly overcrowded, with the population increasing to approximately 80,000 inhabitants by 1888. Work and housing conditions worsened, and a significant economic underclass developed. 55% of children in the East End died before they were 5 years old, which is freaking crazy. This almost sounds like if, in retrospect, it kind of sounds like the plague from back then, like like when mice were like kind of like not poisoning, but they're kind of like I guess in a better term, like poisoning their food, or it was like a worse plague than that, but robbery, violence, and alcohol dependency were commonplace back then, and the endemic poverty drove many women to prostitution to survive on a daily basis. Which is sad. It's like back then it's like we don't know what that could be like now, because it's like we have working class jobs and all that stuff, and like I said in the article, it said 55% of children born in the East End died before they were 5 years old. So they did not even make it till five. And if some of those children survived, like that, it was like due to the grace of God right there. Um, but by October 1888, London's Metro Police System estimated that there were 62 brothels and 1,200 women working as prostitutes in Whitechapel, with approximately 8,500 people residing in the 233 common lodging houses within Whitechapel every night, with the nightly price of a coffin bed being 4 pence, equivalent to like £2 in 2023, and the cost of sleeping upon to a lean-to or hangover rope stretched across the dormitory being 2 pence per person. Which that's not good, man. It's like 8,500 people residing in a 233 common lodging houses. Like they had to like cram people in there. That's like public transit now, like in Japan, like they gotta stuff people into that damn metro train, and they gotta like get to work and all that stuff too. Um, but it's just crazy. Like this place called Whitechapel, it was like one of those like not economic havens, but it was kind of like one of those like influx of like immigrants and all that stuff, and it's just like a lot of stuff. Like some of these women back then like had to survive, and they had to like put themselves out there for prostitution, because it's like they don't know how they're going to feed their families or feed themselves if they were single or whatever. Um, but then like the economy problems in Whitechapel were accompanied by the steady rise in social tensions between 86 and 89 in 1986 and 89, sorry. Frequent demonstrations led to the police intervention and public unrest, such as Bloody Sunday in 1888. Anti-Semitism, crime, nepotism, racism, social disturbance, and severe deprivation influenced public perceptions that Whitechapel was a notorious den of immorality. Such perceptions were strengthened in 1888 when the series of vicious and grotesque murders attributed to Jack the Ripper received unprecedented coverage in the media. So this place was a cesspool full of like crime and robbery and like and prostitution and all that stuff. But then it's like over the years, it's like with the Jack the Ripper stuff that's been in the media, it's like it's grown synonymously with notoriety back then. And I don't know if it's still like synonymous with that nowadays. But I would love to like learn more into it. But yeah, like that's just crazy. That is just freaking crazy, man. So a large number of the attacks against women in the East End during this time uns- uncertain adds like how too many victims like were murdered by the same individual. 11 separate murders stretching from April 3rd of 1888 to February 13th of 1891 were included in a Metropolitan Police investigation and were known collectively in the police docket as the Whitechapel murders. Sorry. Opinions vary as to whether these murders should be linked to the same culprit, but 5 of the 11 Whitechapel murders are, are known as the Canonical Five, are widely believed to be work of the Ripper. Most experts point to deep slash wounds to the throat, followed by extensive abdominal and genital area mutilation, the removal of internal organs, and progressive facial mutilations as the distinctive features of the Ripper's modus operandi. And if anybody knows about that, it's like, it's very basically like surgery back then. And in case if you do not know what modus operandi is, it is short for MO, but it's like, it's the individual if I could speak to that, the individual's habits of working particularly in the context of business or criminal investigations, but it's generally also a Latin phrase approximately translated as mode or matter of operating. So the first two cases in the Whitechapel murders file were those of Emma Elizabeth Smith and Martha Taperum, were not included in the canonical five, though. So both women, were robbed or murdered on a staircase and all stuff. Like the first one, Smith was sexually assaulted and robbed. The second one was murdered on a staircase landing in George Yard. She suffered 39 stab wounds to her throat, lungs, heart, liver, spleen, stomach, and abdomen, with additional knife wounds inflicted to her breasts and vagina. Holy shit. This dude is a savage ripper. Like, no pun intended, but it is like a very, like, it's just so crazy. But Smith, she was, like I said, she was robbed and sexually assaulted. She had been bludgeoned about the face and received a cut to the ear. A blunt object was also inserted into her vagina, rupturing her petromonium, which is the serous membrane forming the lining of the cavity or the colonium in column in annenotes or some invertebrates such as like annelids. But it's kind of the lining of the cavity that supports like the most of the organs, like blood vessels, left lymph nodes and nerves. Just a little heads up there. So back to Tabram here. But all but one of her wounds have been inflicted with a bladed object, such as a penknife, and with one possible exception, all of the wounds have been inflicted by a right-handed individual. But Tabram had not been raped, which is crazy. The savagery of the murder, the lack of the obvious motive, and the closeness of the location and date to a later canonical Ripper murders led to the police to link this murder to those later committed by Jack the Ripper. However, this murder differs from the later murders because though she had been repeatedly stabbed, she had not suffered any slash wounds to her throat or abdomen. So this one's kind of different from the Smith one, where it's like she had gotten sexually assaulted and robbed, whereas like the other lady, she just got murdered on a staircase and suffered 39 stab wounds to every part of her body basically. But man, like that's just like one of those things like Jesus Christ, like what the hell is wrong with this guy? So going into detail with one of the victims here, Mary Ann Nichols, the very first one to be murdered and mutilated by Jack the Ripper. She was born Mary Ann Walker, August 26th, 1845, and she died on August 31st, 5 days after her birthday in 1888. She was 43. The cause of death was syncope due to a hemorrhage caused by the severity of the carotid arteries. And that's just crazy. She was a domestic servant, also a prostitute. She was a victim of serial murder, and she was married to William Nichols, and they had 5 children altogether. It's just crazy, like when when somebody takes away, like, a father or a mother, and it's like, it's like what's going through the husband or wife's mind when you hear that news, like, how am I supposed to take care of my kids? How am I supposed to feed our family? How am I supposed to look after my children? Because, like, and it's like, and also, how are you supposed to move on after that? After hearing that, your husband or your wife had passed away. Like, it's like one of those things where it's just crazy to hear some of these things, because, like, you don't know if it's true or not. But with the synonymous, like, I guess the history of Jack the Ripper, it's like, it's like all these tales and folklore of, like, like, well, he murdered these people, he murdered all these people and all that stuff. It's like, he mostly just went after women. I'm thinking maybe it's just because of, like, the mental psyche of, like, having, like, his mom or something, or maybe an aunt or something like that, and she was like, "Oh, I hate you," or something. But it's like one of those, like, maybe it's like a childhood trauma thing. That's what I'm, like, trying to get at here. Um, but it's like, it's just crazy, man. Like, some of the, it's like, that's like that's every single murderer's motive. Sometimes it's like, if they have like a bastard father or a bastard mother, or like whatever, like, or if they hate their fucking sibling, and it's like, it's, oh, I'm gonna hit you, or I'm gonna hit you, and, like, I'm gonna murder you someday, and then it's like they do it, and then you're like, okay, like, let me just get that bloodlust out of here now. It's like they gotta, like, get rid of that body, or they gotta get rid of that, whatever. Um, but I want to kind of go more into that mental psyche of Jack the Ripper, just to, like, see, like, what is going on with this guy. But let's get more in depth into maybe the investigation. Maybe we'll get some more answers here. So, with the investigation, the vast majority of the City of London police files relating to their investigation into the Whitechapel murders were destroyed in the Blitz. Now, I do not know what the Blitz is, but looking at research here, this was a German bombing campaign against the United Kingdom from September 7th of 1940 to May 11th of 1941, for a little more than 8 months during the Second World War, just saying. The surviving Metropolitan Police files allowed a detailed view of investigative procedures in the Victorian era. A large team of policemen conducted house-to-house inquiries throughout Whitechapel. Forensic material was collected and examined. Subjects were identified, traced, and either examined more closely or eliminated from the inquiry. Modern police work follows the exact same pattern. More than 2,000 people were interviewed, up to 300 people were investigated, and 80 people were detained. Following the murders of Stride and Dowles, the Commissioner of the City Police, Sir James Fraser, offered a reward of £500 for the arrest of the Ripper. The investigation was initially conducted by the Metropolitan Police Whitechapel H Division Criminal Investigation Department, headed by Detective Inspector Edmund Reed. After the murder of Nichols, Detective Inspector if I can speak today, sorry. Detective Inspectors Frederick Abnerline, Jesus Christ, if I can speak today, I'm sorry. Abner Line, Henry Moore, and Walter Angers were sent from central office at Scotland Yard to assist. The City of London police were involved under Detective Inspector, oh my god, if I could speak today, I'm so sorry, people. Under Detective Inspector James McWilliam after the Dowles murder, which occurred within the City of London. The overall direction of the murder inquiries was hampered by the fact that a new appointed head of the CID, Assistant Commissioner Robert Anderson was on leave in Switzerland between September 7th and October 6th, during the time when Chapman, Stride, and Dowd were killed. This prompted Colonel Sir Charles Warren, the Commissioner of the Metro Police, to appoint Chief Inspector Donald Swanson to coordinate the inquiry from Scotland Yard. Butchers, slaughters, surgeons, and physicians were suspected because of the manner of the mutilations. A surviving note from Major Henry Smith, acting commissioner of the city police, indicts that the alibis of the local butchers and slaughterers, I can't speak today, I'm so sorry, people, were investigated with the result that they were eliminated from the inquiry. A report from Inspector Swanson to the Home Office confirms that 76 butchers and slaughterers were visited, and that the inquiry encompassed all their employees within the past 6 months. Wow, like that's kind of crazy though. I mean, that's kind of to be expected around that time. Butchers, slaughters, people, like surgeons and physicians, like they were kind of suspected about that. Because with the uh, modus operandi of like the face, and and like 39 stab wounds and all that stuff, it's like like anybody could be doing that shit. Um, some of the figures, including Queen Victoria, thought the pattern of the murders indicated that the culprit was a butcher or cattle drover on one of the cattle boats that plied between London and mainland Europe. Whitechapel was close to the London docks, and usually such boats docked on Thursday or Friday and then departed on Saturday or Sunday. The cattle boats were examined, but the dates of the murders did not coincide with a single boat's movements, and the transfer of a crewman between boats was also ruled out. So, man, it's like all these people, like, they have, like, people from the Home Office, CID, and all that stuff. And they're ordering, like, or they're telling people, like, we're gonna offer you, like, this much money to give us, Jack the Ripper. So going into like the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, the committee petitioned the government to raise a reward for information leading to the arrest of the killer, offered their own reward of £50, the equivalent of between like 5,900 to 86,000 pounds in 2021, which is freaking a lot of money, for information leading to his capture, and hired private detectives to question witnesses independently. So they were literally going out of their way to like trying to find information on this guy. Sounds like everyday police and CIA and all that stuff nowadays, don't you think? So getting out of the investigation aspect of it, let's go talking about like the suspects of this thing. So the concentration of the killings around weekends and public holidays, and within the short distance of each other, was indicated to many that the Ripper was maybe in regular employment and lived locally. Others opinionated that the killer was maybe an educated upperclassman, maybe possibly a doctor or aristocrat who vultured into Whitechapel for or from a well-to-do area. Such theories draw on cultural precipitations such as like fear of the medical field, mistrust of modern science, or the exploitation of the poor by the rich. The term ripperology was coined to describe the study and analysis of the Ripper case in an effort to determine his identity, and the murders have inspired numerous works of fiction. I want to actually look into this. So Ripperology is like going into like works of fiction, like it says, like ranging from graphic novels published at the time of the murders to modern motion pictures, televised TV dramas, and video games. Some important influences on the depiction of the Ripper include Marie Belloc Lowride's 1913 novel, The Lodger, which was adapted for the stage and film, and Stephen Knight's 1976 work, Jack the Ripper: The Final Solution, which expanded on conspiracy theory involving Freemasons and royalty. The literature of the late Victorian era which includes Arthur Conan Doyle's first Sherlock Holmes stories and Robert Louis Stevenson's Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, has provided inspiration for storymakers who have fused these fictional worlds of the Ripper. The Ripper makes appearances throughout the science fiction and horror genres and is internationally recognized as an evil character. The association of the Ripper with death and sex is particularly appealing to heavy metal and rock musicians who have incorporated the Ripper murders into their work, which is a little interesting tidbit there. So there are a lot of numerous and varied variety theories out there of the actual identity and profession of Jack the Ripper, but authorities are not agreed upon any of them, and the number of suspects reach over 100. Despite continued interest in the case, the Ripper's identity remains unknown to this day, which is still kind of crazy. But it's crazy that back then they don't know the name, don't know his name, but nowadays it's like they still don't know his name. Which is one of those things where it's like, okay, well, how are we supposed to catch this guy? But interesting little facts about the suspects thing. They made a term out of it called Ripperology, which that it's everything. Every time that you learn something on this show, it's like learn it from here, because I'm still probably mind blown about some stuff too. But let's kind of go into the letters here. There's 3 letters in particular, and I want to talk to you guys about them in depth a little bit. So, over the course of the Whitechapel murders, the police, newspapers, and other individuals received hundreds of letters regarding the case. Some letters were well-intentioned offers of advice as how to catch the killer, but the vast majority were either hoax or generally useless. Hundreds of letters claimed to have been written by the killer himself, and 3 of these in particular are prominent: the Dear Boss letter, the Saucy Jackie postcard, and the From Hell letter. The Dear Boss letter, dated September 25th and postmarked September 27th of 1888, was received that day by the Central News Agency, or the CNA, and was forwarded to Scotland Yard on September 29th. Initially, it was considered a hoax, but when Indells was found 3 days after the letter's postmark, with the exception of one ear cut from her body, the promise of the author to clip the lady's sick ears off gained attention. Indell's ear appeared to have been nicked by the killer during his attack, and incidentally, and the letter writer's threat to send the ears to the police was never carried out. The name Jack the Ripper was first used in this letter by the signer, and gained worldwide notoriety after its publication. Most of the letters that follow copied the letter's tone, and some authors adopting pseudonyms such as George of the High Rip Gang and Jack Sheridan the Ripper. Some sources claim that another letter dated on September 17th, 1888 was the first to use the name Jack the Ripper, but most experts believe that this was a fake inserted into police records in the 21st century. Whew, man, that is crazy. If I could try to read it, that'd be kind of cool. So I can't really read it because it's all in cursive, but that's alright. So on to the next one. The Saucy Jackie postcard was postmarked October 1st, 1888, and was received the same day by the CNA. The handwriting was similar to the Dear Boss letter and mentioned the Cannon murders, if I could say it, the Cannon murders committed on September 30th, which the author refers to by writing double event this time. It has been argued that the postcard was posted before the murders were publicized, making it unlikely that a crank would have such knowledge of the crime. However, it was postmarked for the 24 hours after the killings occurred, long after details of the murders were known and publicized by journalists, and it had become a general community gossip by the residents of Whitechapel. And That is kind of true. With like postcards and letters nowadays, it's like it kind of reminds me going back to the when I had did the Zodiac Killer on one of the episodes. He would send in like letters, and it was like cut out of like magazines and all that stuff, and like they would make the letters, and he was like sending threats to people, like sending threats to local news stations, and also saying like like if this does not happen, like I will murder everybody in here or something. And it was like one of those mysteries that remained a mystery for a long time. And we do not know who the Zodiac Killer is, but it's like I'm thinking like this is kind of like one of those things where it's like they're playing mind games with the police and news people, and like just kind of get notoriety out of it, which is smart. But it's like at the end of the day, it's like some of that notoriety is gonna catch up with you, because it's like you can only hold on to stardom for so long until you crash and burn. Um, but with the Dear Boss thing, with the Dear Boss letter and Saucy Jackie postcard, it's like it was kind of it was received, but then it was like I said with the Saucy Jackie thing, it was like the same handwriting, and it mentioned the murders committed on September 30th, and the author refers to it as like writing a double event this time. And plus, I do not know what a crank is, but if you guys know what that is, let me know in the comments below. Now, on to the From Hell letter. It was received by George Lusk, leader of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, on October 16th, 1888. The handwriting and style is unlike that of the Dear Boss letter and Saucy Jackie postcard. The letter came with a small box in which Lusk discovered half of a human kidney, preserved in the spirits of wine, which is ethanol. Endow's left kidney had been removed by the killer. The writer claimed that he fried and ate the missing kidney half, which is fucking crazy cannibalism here. There is a disagreement over the kidney. Some contend that it belonged to Endow's, while others argue it may have been a macabre practical joke. The kidney was examined by Thomas Openshaw of the London Hospital, who determined that it was human and from the left side, but contrary to false newspaper reports, he could not determine any other biological characteristics. Openshaw subsequently also received a letter signed Jack the Ripper. Oh boy, this is like it's like spiraling out of control sometimes here. But Scotland Yard published facsimiles of the Dear Boss letter and postcard on October 3rd, in the ultimately vain hope that a member of the public would recognize the handwriting. Charles Warren explained in a letter to Godfrey Lushington, permanent Undersecretary of the State of the for the Home Department. I think the whole thing a hoax, but of course we are bound to try and ascertain the writer in any case. On October 7th, 1888, George R. Sims in the Sunday newspaper Referee implied scathingly that the letter was written by a journalist to hurl the circulation of a newspaper sky high. Police officials later claimed to have identified a specific journalist as the author of both the Dear Boss letter and the postcard. The journalist was identified as Tom Bullitt in a letter from Chief Inspector John Littlechild to George R. Sims, dated September 23rd, 1913. A journalist named Fred Best reportedly confessed in 1931 that he and a colleague at the Star had written the letters signed Jack the Ripper to heighten interest in the murders and keep the business alive. Wow, like it's literally a hoax, but they had these people kind of like write them letters, being like, okay, well, we've got these letters and all this stuff. It's like circulating buzz, and they want to try to keep it alive. They had like somebody from a newspaper, and then they had like two people from the Star and all this stuff, and it's crazy. It's just to have people be like, okay, well, we're gonna circulate buzz. How are we gonna do that, buzz? It's like we're gonna sign it Jack the Ripper, and that's how it kind of made some buzz. So a little bit more on the Dear Boss letter thing here. After the publication of the Dear Boss letter, Jack the Ripper supplanted Leather Apron as the name adopted by the press and public to describe the killer. The name Jack was already used to describe another fabled London attacker, Spring-Heeled Jack, who supposedly leapt over walls to strike at his victims and escape as quickly as he came. The invention and adoption of a nickname for a particular killer became standard media practice, with examples such as the Axeman of New Orleans, the Boston Strangler, and the Beltway Sniper. Examples derived from Jack the Ripper include the French Ripper, the Dusseldorf Ripper, the Camden Ripper, Blackout Ripper, Jack the Stripper, the Yorkshire Ripper, and the Rostov Ripper. Sensational press reports, combined with the fact that no one has ever convicted of the murders, have confused analysts and created a legend that casts a shadow over later serial killers. Man, this guy or person is a mystery still to this day. But kind of closing this thing out. So the nature of the Ripper murders and the impoverished lifestyle of the victims drew attention to the poor living conditions in the East End and galvanized public opinion over the overcrowded, insanitary slums. In the 2 decades after the murders, the worst of the slums were cleared and demolished, but the streets and some buildings survive, and the legend of the Ripper is still promoted by various guided tours of the murder sites and other locations pertaining to the case. For many years, the 10 Bells public house in Commercial Street, which had been frequented by at least one of the Cannon Ripper victims, which was the focus of such tours. In the aftermath of the murders and later Jack the Ripper came the child's boogeyman, depiction or more phantomistic or monstrous in the 1920s and 30s. He was depicted in film dressed in everyday clothes as a man with a hidden secret, preying on his unsuspecting victims. Atmosphere and evil were suggested through lighting effects and shadow play. By the 1960s, the Ripper had become the symbol of predator aristocrat, and was more often portrayed in a top hat dressed as a gentleman. The establishment as a whole became the villain, with the Ripper acting as a infestation of the upper class exploitation. The image of the Ripper emerged with or borrowed symbols from horror stories such as Dracula's Cloak or Victor Frankenstein's Organ Harvest. The fictional world of the Ripper confused with multiple genres ranging from Sherlock Holmes to Japanese erotic horror. Jack the Ripper features in hundreds of works in fiction, hundreds of works of fiction and works which straddle the boundaries between fict and fiction, including the Ripper's letters and Hoax Diary of Jack the Ripper. The Ripper appears in novels, short stories, poems, comic books, games, songs, plays, operas, TV programs, and films. More than 100 non-fiction works deal exclusively with Jack the Ripper murders, making this case one of the most written about in true crime genre. The term Ripperology was coined by Colin Wilson in the 1970s to describe the study of the case by professionals and amateurs. The periodical Ripperania, Ripperologists, and the Ripper Notes published their research. In 2006, a BBC History magazine poll selected Jack the Ripper as the worst Briton in history. And then in 2015, the Jack the Ripper, there was a museum opened about him in East London and attracted criticism by both Tower Hamlets Mayor John Briggs and protesters. Similar protests occurred in 2021 with the second of 2 Jack the Chipper shop and chip shops opened in Greenwich, with some patrons threatening to boycott the premises. Man, this is like one of those serial killers that like I said, there was movies, there's video games, there's short stories, there's a hoax diary about him, books, songs, plays, operas, TV programs, like so much stuff. Like there's a lot of like fiction and nonfiction stuff about him, that will have people kind of like questioning, like, okay, is it real? Is it not real? Um, but the term ripperology in 1970 to describe the study of the case by professionals and amateurs, that is something that you do not hear today sometimes. Because like the fictional word of the Ripper, like I said, like it can be fused with multiple genres, like ranging from like Sherlock Holmes stuff to like Japanese erotic horror, which is completely out of the price range here, or way out of that ballpark here. Um, but like it's like it was saying, like it's like some people are kind of classifying him as like a villain, which he is, but then like the aftermath of the murders and later Jack the Ripper became the child's boogeyman. Like that's like a whole thing of itself right there, and depictions were often phantomistic or monstrous, which is crazy. But this man is like very well known and very synonymous with the East End London scene of the 1980s, 1880s and 1890s. Um, but like I'm glad that I talked about this person, because it kind of made me learn something, which we want to learn something on this show every once in a while. But with that being said, I think this is a wrap on my serial killer episode for tonight. I'm out of breath, so let me just take a minute to recuperate and get my thoughts together. All right, I've gathered my thoughts about that, and I think this Jack the Ripper episode is getting kind of long, and I'm gonna wrap it up very shortly. This is one of those cases where it's like it makes you want to learn more about the person and all that stuff. There's probably gonna be some times where it's like, okay, like if there's nothing on, I'm just gonna like watch something and learn something. Hopefully you guys learned something about Jack the Ripper today. If you guys have learned about Jack the Ripper in the past, please let us know in the comments below. What do you think about this episode and the Jack the Ripper as a whole? So, with that being said, thank you very much for listening to tonight's episode. We do really appreciate it. Um, with that being said, next month is November. November, Turkey month. We are 2 months away from ending the year on a high, kind of. But we gotta get through November 1st, and then we gotta get into December. And in December is my birthday month. So happy, I guess, 2 month birthday to me. So with that also being said, tonight's song of the night, it is from a band that I've never heard before in my life, but I keep hearing this song a lot on the radio, and it is Wage War, and the song is Magnetic. And if you like, some heavy metal mixed with some like kind of like not pop punk sound, but it was kind of like a pop punk sound. This is the song for you. And if you guys know who Wage War is, kudos to you. Glad you know who they are. With also that being said, please follow us and subscribe to us on this YouTube page. We do have a link tree in the description down below, which will lead to our Instagram page, Twitter page, Reddit page, my gaming YouTube channel, our TikTok channel. I'm very kind of close to 1,500. Hopefully, I can get to 1,500 by the end of this year. If not, that's okay. There's always next year. So, also, with that being said, I know I keep saying that a lot, but Song of the Night, Wage War, Magnetic, and that's it. And I will see you in November. And also, happy Halloween, everyone. Hope you have a safe time. Take care. Stay safe. Love you. Bye. Peace.